This is everything you thought you wanted to know, but didn't know you needed to know, but need to know about a quadrilateral. So I'm going through all six different ones here. Parallelogram, trapezoid, kite, and then on the back side, you'll see rhombus, rectangle, and square. You can find this on your classroom. I put it on there. It was something we were going to do on Tuesday before we ended up getting school called off, but it has the 5 things about parallelograms. So opposite sides are congruent. So you'll see I marked opposite sides congruent. Opposite sides are parallel. That's true, parallel. Opposite angles are congruent. So you can see where the opposite angles are congruent. The diagonals will bisect each other, so you can see that this is equal and this is equal. And consecutive angles are supplementary, which means if you have a green one and a red one, they are going to add up to 180. Okay, so when you're looking at a parallelogram, other properties apply for this when it comes to rectangles, rhombuses, kites. Or sorry, not kites, rectangles, rhombus, rectangles, and squares. So all the same things are true, but what gets added here is that diagonals are also perpendicular. So you'll notice I put a perpendicular right here. And angles are bisected by the diagonals. So notice here on this rhombus that these angles are bisected, which means they're in 2 equal parts. And these are in 2 equal parts. And these parts add up and equal the same as these parts here, just so they would over here. So rhombuses have a little bit of different something's going on. And the 2 things that they have different are the angles being bisected and the diagonals being perpendicular. There we go. Those are the 2 things that are different. Yep, that's it. Okay, so when it comes to rectangles, the couple of things that are different here is that all angles are going to equal 90 degrees. So they're all equal to each other. These are not bisected, so don't get that confused with a rhombus. They're not bisected. And diagonals are actually congruent. So this diagonal is congruent to this diagonal. Now think about your television. If you have a TV and these aren't congruent, your TV is going to be kind of crooked, right? It would be really hard to watch and probably give you a headache. So all the other things are actually true. This is not true. Angles are not bisected by the diagonals. I'm going to cross that off. Okay, so make sure you cross that one off. All right, so square. These are bisected. This is probably where I got that from. They're bisected, and when they do get bisected, they're all 45 degrees because each corner is 90 degrees. So you have this and this are different. You have this that's different. And so those are the things that you got different than if you were to have another type of figure. Okay, so that is a rectangle and a square. Now, a trapezoid. This is my favorite figure, but I think it's because it's kind of quirky. 2 opposite sides, we call them bases. These are going to be parallel to each other, so this would be considered a base and a base. And then these are called legs. So it's 2 legs. And if these are congruent to each other, this is called an isosceles trapezoid. So if the opposite legs are congruent, it's isosceles. Opposite bases are parallel. The base angles are congruent, so you can see this angle here and this angle here are congruent to each other. And then these 2 up here are congruent to each other. They're called base angles because they're on the same base. Diagonals are congruent to each other. Okay, that's also true of a square and a rectangle. And consecutive angles of opposites, these are going to add up to 180. So the other thing you need to know about trapezoids is the mid-segment formula. Basically, if you take this here and you average them together, these 2 right here, average them together, which means add them up and divide them by how many you add, which is 2 sides, you get this side. So 2 of the middles are equal to the addition of these 2. So either way, you can use the mid-segment formula. And a kite, kites are kind of unique. Kites' adjacent sides are congruent. 1 pair of congruent opposite angles, perpendicular diagonals, forming that 90 degrees. That's also true of a rhombus, don't forget. And one pair of diagonals are congruent. So we got this pair of diagonals right here that are congruent. And consecutive angles opposite bases are congruent. I don't know why that cut off, but these right here. Okay, so just some things you need to know about quadrilaterals. If you want to just a really good overview, please do not forget to cross off this portion in the back. That's a typo that probably carried over from me copying and pasting. And don't forget to add congruent here. Okay, take care.